2 pink lines. That's all it took to incinerate my meticulously crafted 10-year plan. It was supposed to be one night, a corporate masquerade ball in a city of rain and secrets, a voice like distant thunder, and a perfect, faceless stranger in a bespoke suit who set my entire world on fire. I left his penthouse at dawn with a single rule broken and a heavy, wolf-engraved souvenir coaster in my pocket, convinced I'd gotten away with it. Now, responsible to a fault, I had to find him. I tracked the coaster back to its source, Stormborn Tower, a black glass monolith that pierced the perpetually gray sky of the city of Ethelgard. I expected an awkward, professionally managed conversation in a corner office. I expected a handsome mistake in a hefty NDA. I never expected to be dragged by elite security into a private elevator that shot straight to the top of the world. I never expected to be brought before a king. Alpha Jeffery Stormborn. A name whispered with fear in the city's most powerful circles. A predator they called vicious, whose glare alone could tank a stock price. And as I stood there, staring at the terrifying, undisputed ruler of this corporate empire, I realized the catastrophic, world-ending truth. My one-night stand wasn't just a stranger. He was the most powerful, dangerous man in the city. And I was pregnant with his heir.
Chapter 1. My 10-year plan was a thing of beauty, a laminated roadmap to culinary success that lived in my head and dictated my every move. And the catering gig at the Stormborn Tower Founders Gala was a major milestone. The pay was ludicrous, enough to secure the down payment on my future restaurant. And the client list was a who's who of Ethelgard's corporate elite. People so rich and powerful, their influence was practically its own currency. The final event was an exclusive masquerade ball, held in a breathtaking event space on the 80th floor with panoramic views of the entire glittering, rain-slick city. As my team packed up the last of the canapes, a rare, unscripted impulse flickered to life. For one night, I could be someone else. Not Chef Sonia Brook, the driven woman with a business plan, but a mystery, a woman in a borrowed silk dress and a simple silver mask. I was nursing a glass of champagne, feeling smugly anonymous, when I heard it, a voice like distant thunder that cut through the polite murmur of the party. Hiding from your admirers? I turned to find a man who was less a guest and more a force of nature. He was impossibly tall, built with the solid, uncompromising strength of the skyscraper around us, and wore a stark black mask that only served to highlight the sharp, severe line of his jaw. His bespoke suit probably cost more than my car. Merely observing the local wildlife in its natural habitat, I quipped, my heart giving a ridiculous, unscheduled flutter. It's a fascinating ecosystem of predator-prey. A low chuckle rumbled in his chest, a sound that did funny things to my insides. Be careful, he murmured, his voice a velvety baritone that wrapped around me like a blanket. Sometimes the predators here enjoy a chase. He offered me his arm, a gesture so confidently old-fashioned it was almost comical in this hyper-modern setting. And yet, I took it. We spent the next hour in a bubble of our own making, the rest of the party fading into a blurry backdrop of city lights. The banter was electric, a dizzying dance of wit and intelligence. He never asked my name, and I never offered mine. We were just two masks, two anonymous souls connected by a magnetic pull so intense it felt like gravity. He exuded a kind of primal authority I'd never encountered, a quiet certainty that he was the most dangerous thing in any room. And instead of running, my stupid traitorous body leaned in closer. I should go, I said, the words feeling like a lie. Should you? He asked, his thumb gently tracing the line of my wrist, sending sparks at my lamb. He leaned in, his voice a velvety promise I was irresistible. Or should you stay and see just how wild this ecosystem can get? My 10-year plan didn't just get derailed, it went up in a glorious, all-consuming bonfire.
Chapter 2. 2 months later, my 10-year plan was officially in the toilet. Quite literally. I was hunched over the porcelain throne in my cozy apartment in the Artisan Quarter, paying homage to the god of morning sickness for the third time that day. The persistent drizzle of Apfelgard misted the window panes, a perfect gray backdrop to my new, chaotic reality. My life, once a pristine spreadsheet of goals and ambitions, had devolved into a mess of saltine crackers and ginger ale. I'd ignored the signs for weeks, blaming fatigue on my demanding schedule and the weird food aversions on chef's burnout. But there's one symptom you can't rationalize away. With a sense of impending doom, I unwrapped the pregnancy test that bought from a downtown pharmacy like a common criminal, hiding it under a bag of artisan cheese. The 5 minutes I had to wait felt longer than my entire culinary school education. When the timer finally beeped, I forced myself to look. 2 pink lines. 2 stark, unapologetic little lines that casually detonated my entire future. My 10-year plan might as well have been a cocktail napkin for all the good it was doing me now. Panic, hot and sharp, tried to claw its way up my throat, but I shoved it back down. I wasn't a panicker. I was a problem solver. I sank onto the cool tile of the bathroom floor, my head in my hands, and took a deep, shuddering breath. Okay, Sonia, assess the situation. You are pregnant. You are also single, career-obsessed, and the father is a handsome, faceless memory. A part of me, the reckless, champagne-fueled part, whispered that I could do this alone. But the responsible, pragmatic part, the part that paid bills on time, knew the truth. He had a right to know. I went to my jewelry box where I tucked away my one and only clue. It wasn't wood, but a heavy, polished piece of obsidian that was cool to the touch. In the center, a stylized silver wolf's head was intricately etched, the sleek, aggressive logo of Stormborn Corp. I had a name, I had a location. My 10-year plan was in ashes, but a new, terrifyingly simple one was already forming in its place. I had to go back. I had to face the man with the voice like thunder and inform him that our one-night loophole had just created a lifelong contract.
Chapter 3. Executing the plan was the easy part. It was just like prepping for a new, terrifyingly unpredictable recipe. I sublet my apartment in the Artisan Quarter, put my restaurant plans on a temporary hold, and traded my chef whites for what I hoped was a powerful businesswoman outfit, a sharp blazer and heels that made me feel more like an imposter than an equal. Armed with a full tank of gas and a dangerously optimistic attitude, I drove from the warm, brick-lined streets of my neighborhood towards the cold heart of the city. The closer I got, the more the quirky little shops and vibrant cafes gave way to the concrete and glass canyons of the financial district. Stormborn Tower wasn't just a building. It was a statement of brutal, uncompromising power, a shard of black glass that seemed to absorb the perpetual gray sky without reflecting any of it back. It loomed over the other corporate headquarters, a silent predator in a jungle of its own making. My bravado from the night before began to feel like a distant, foolish memory. The lobby was a cathedral of minimalist wealth. Polished black marble floors reflected the cold, recessed lighting, and the air was still and sterile, chilled to a degree that felt alien after the city's damp air. It smelled of money and ambition. The woman at the vast white marble reception desk looked like she had been sculpted from ice. Her blazer was sharp enough to cut glass, and her polite smile didn't reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice smooth and professional. My carefully rehearsed speech felt flimsy and ridiculous, but I pressed on. Yes, I have a personal inquiry for the gentleman I met at the Founders Gala 2 months ago," I said, sliding the heavy obsidian coaster onto the pristine marble. "He gave me this." The woman's eyes flickered down to the coaster. For a fraction of a second, her professional mask slipped. A flicker of something passed through her eyes. Recognition.
and a deep and profound wariness. Her smile became a little tighter, a little more fixed. She didn't need to check a database. She knew exactly what it meant. "Your name, please?" she asked, her tone now laced with a steely caution. "Sonia Brook." She gave a single curt nod, then pressed a button on a sleek internal phone system. She spoke in a low, discreet tone. "Evelyn Heir, a Ms. Sonia Brook has arrived at the ground floor. She has the coaster." She paused, listening. "Yes, sir. At once." She hung up, her gaze meeting mine, now completely devoid of any feigned warmth. "Mr. Stormborn will see you now. The Alpha is waiting in his penthouse."
Chapter 4. Alpha? The word was so bizarre, so out of place in this palace of glass and steel, that my brain couldn't quite compute it. Was that some weird billionaire nickname? A corporate in-joke for the man at the top of the food chain? Before I could formulate a witty, sarcastic question, two men materialized at my side. They weren't the typical security guards you saw in corporate lobbies. They were built like professional athletes stuffed into impeccably tailored black suits, their jawlines tight, their eyes scanning the pristine lobby with a quiet, predatory focus. They moved with a silent, coordinated grace that was deeply unsettling. "Wait, I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice sounding weak in a cavernous, echoing space. My plan had been to have a discreet, professional conversation, not to be frog-marched through a corporate headquarters. I just have a few questions for Mr. Stormborn. "This way, Miss Brook," one of the guards said, his voice a flat, non-negotiable baritone. He gestured towards a private, unmarked elevator at the far end of the lobby, a sleek panel of brushed chrome that blended almost seamlessly into the marble wall. This was no longer a request. This was an abduction in broad daylight, conducted with terrifying corporate efficiency. My heart, which had been doing a nervous tap dance, started a full-on panicked salsa. Every instinct screamed at me to turn and run, to flee back into the familiar rain-slicked streets of the artisan quarter. But the guards were a solid wall of muscle on either side of me, their presence a silent promise that I was going absolutely nowhere. They led me to the elevator, and the chrome doors slid open without a sound. The interior was a minimalist box of dark wood and soft golden light. There was only one button, a silver wolf's head, the same one from the coaster. One of the guards pressed it, and the doors whispered shut, sealing me in. The elevator ascended with a stomach-lurching speed, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the machinery. Through a small, discreet window, I watched the sprawling gray tapestry of Æthelgard shrink below me, the historic spires, the winding river, the endless sea of rooftops, until it all looked like a map. I was rising above it all, leaving the world I knew behind and entering the lair of the city's most vicious man. My simple plan had gone catastrophically, terrifyingly wrong.
Chapter 5. The elevator doors whispered open not into a reception area, but directly into the heart of the beast's lair. The penthouse was a sprawling, cavernous space of polished concrete floors, dark wood accents, and entire walls of glass that showcased a breathtaking 360-degree view of Æthelgard. From this height, the city's perpetual gray drizzle was transformed into a silent, glittering tapestry. The sheer, arrogant power of the place was a physical blow. It was the view of a king looking down upon his kingdom, yet for all its opulence, the space was cold, minimalist, and unnervingly silent. It wasn't a home, it was a cage of glass and steel. He was standing by the window, his back to me, a commanding silhouette against the sprawling city. He wore a simple, dark t-shirt and trousers, a stark contrast to the bespoke suit from the gala, but the casual attire did nothing to diminish the aura of absolute authority that radiated from him. One of the guards cleared his throat. "Sir, Miss Brook is here." He turned, and the breath caught in my throat. It was him. The jawline, the sheer size of him, the way he moved with a silent, fluid grace. It was all achingly familiar, but now there was a face to go with the memory. Sharp aristocratic features, a shadow of stubble, and eyes the color of molten gold that seemed to burn with a fierce, ancient intelligence. And in those eyes, I saw a flicker of cold, hard recognition. He remembered me. "Leave us," he commanded, his voice the same deep, rumbling thunder that had haunted my dreams. It wasn't a request. The guards vanished as silently as they had appeared. He didn't move from his spot, just watched me, his golden gaze pinning me in place. The playful, charming man from the masquerade was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating predator. "You were not invited here," he stated, his tone flat and dismissive. My fear, which had been threatening to swallow me whole, was suddenly cinched away by a hot spark of indignation. He was acting like I was the one who had broken a rule. I lifted my chin, finding a sliver of my old defiant self. I shot back, my voice shaking only slightly. "Believe me, this wasn't on my 10-year plan, but you left me with more than just a souvenir." I reached into my bag and pulled out the positive pregnancy test, holding it up like a white flag of surrender in a war I didn't even know I was fighting. "Congratulations," I said, the sarcasm a thin shield for my terror. "It's yours." The controlled corporate mask on his face didn't just crack, it shattered. For a split second, something wild and unbelievably furious flashed in his golden eyes. The air in the room grew thick, heavy, and a low, guttural growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that was, and could never be, human.
Chapter 6. The growl was not a sound of the city. It wasn't the rumble of a distant metro train or the hum of the tower's state-of-the-art climate control. It was a deep guttural snarl that ripped through the sterile silence of the penthouse, a sound of pure untamed rage that belonged in a primeval forest, not a boardroom. It vibrated through the polished concrete floor and straight up my spine. My blood ran cold. The man standing before me, the corporate titan, the predator in a bespoke suit, was something else entirely, something terrifyingly inhuman. Just as quickly as it appeared, the feral mask vanished. Jeffery Stormborn visibly wrestled for control, his jaw tight, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. The golden inferno in his eyes cooled, banked down into the cold, calculating embers of the CEO. The shift was so sudden and absolute, it was more frightening than the growl itself. He was a master of control, and I had just made him lose it. He stalked towards me, not with the fluid grace of before, but with the heavy, deliberate steps of a man trying to contain a violent storm within himself. He didn't even glance at the pregnancy test in my hand. His gaze was locked on mine, sharp and analytical. "How far along?" he demanded, his voice a low, rough rasp. 9 weeks, I whispered, my bravado completely gone. I was trapped at the top of the world with a man who growled. The sheer insanity of my situation washed over me in a dizzying wave. "Who else knows?" "No one," I said immediately. "My doctor, and now you. That's it." He stopped just a few feet from me, his presence an oppressive force field. He wasn't asking these questions like a concerned father-to-be. He was a CEO conducting a risk assessment on a catastrophic data breach. He was calculating the damage. "What do you want, Miss Brook?" he asked, his voice now dangerously quiet. "Money? A settlement to ensure your silence?" The accusation, so cold and transactional, sliced through my terror and struck a nerve of pure, unadulterated anger. I had driven across the city, terrified and alone, to do the right thing, and he was treating me like a common blackmailer? I lifted my chin, my fear momentarily eclipsed by indignation. "What do I want?" I echoed, my voice shaking but dripping with sarcasm. "Honestly, I want a time machine and a stronger brand of champagne. But since that's off the table, I came here because I thought you had the right to know. That's it. My mistake, clearly." He stared at me for a long silent moment, his golden eyes unreadable. My defiance seemed to surprise him more than the pregnancy itself. He gave a single curt nod, as if a final calculation had just been completed in his mind. "You are correct," he said, his tone chillingly final. "It was a mistake. Your mistake was thinking you could just walk in here, drop a bomb like this, and then simply walk out again." He turned and spoke to the empty air. "Leo." A man I hadn't even seen entered from a side door. He was leaner than the security guards, with a calm, intelligent face and the same watchful eyes as his boss. "Sir," he said, "show Miss Brook to the East Suite," Jeffrey commanded, his gaze returning to me, cold and absolute. "She will be staying with us indefinitely. Ensure she has everything she needs, and ensure she does not leave."
Chapter 7. Indefinitely? You can't be serious. The words burst out of me, a bubble of pure, incredulous rage. I turned to the man named Leo, whose calm, polite demeanor was somehow more infuriating than Jeffrey's overt aggression. "You can't just keep me here. This is Ethelgard, not some lawless backwater. It's called kidnapping." "The Alpha is very serious, Miss Brook," Leo replied, his tone as smooth and unruffled as his tailored suit. He gestured down a hallway that was all clean lines and minimalist art. "If you would please follow me." It wasn't a request. The two silent guards fell into step behind us, their presence a silent, final answer to any further protest. My choices were to walk or be carried. Fuming, I walked. He led me to a set of double doors and opened them, revealing a suite that was larger than my entire apartment in the artisan quarter. It was a masterpiece of understated luxury, a spacious living area with a plush cream-colored sofa, a bedroom with a bed that looked like a fluffy white cloud, and a bathroom that could have been ripped from the pages of an architectural magazine. One entire wall was a pane of glass, offering a stunning, uninterrupted view of the city's rain-swept skyline. It was the most beautiful prison I had ever seen. "Your belongings will be collected from your apartment and delivered shortly," Leo stated, calmly, as if he were discussing room service. "A full wardrobe will be provided, the kitchen is fully stocked, any culinary requests you have will be met." I stalked over to the massive window, pressing my hand against the cool, thick glass. The windows didn't open, of course they didn't. Down below, the vibrant, chaotic city hummed with life, a world that I was no longer a part of. "So now what?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Am I supposed to be impressed? Did he think a silk-lined cage is any less of a cage?" Leo's expression remained placid, but a flicker of something, pity maybe, or weary understanding passed through his eyes. "You are under the Alpha's protection, Miss Brook," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly, "for your safety and for the safety of the asset." Asset. The word was a slap in the face. I wasn't a person to them. I wasn't the mother of his child. I was a high-risk investment that needed to be secured. Leo and the guards retreated, the heavy door clicking shut behind them with a soft, final thud. I was alone, surrounded by a level of luxury I could have only dreamed of, and I had never felt more trapped in my entire life. My accidental one-night stand hadn't just gotten me pregnant, it had gotten me captured.
Chapter 8. For the first hour, I was pure, unadulterated fury. I paced the length of the suite like a caged leopard, my designer heels sinking into a rug that probably cost more than my entire university education. I tested the windows, sealed shut, the glass thick and unyielding. I rattled the handle of the main door, locked, of course. I searched for a service entrance, a dumb waiter, a laundry chute big enough to squeeze through. Nothing. The place was a hermetically sealed box of minimalist luxury, a 5-star prison in the sky. My captor, it seemed, was both thorough and had an impeccable eye for interior design. Defeated for the moment, I inspected my gilded cage. My single, sensible suitcase was sitting at the foot of the bed. Next to it, however, were 3 more, brand new, high-end suitcases. I opened one. It was filled with designer clothes, jeans, silk blouses, comfortable sweaters, even lingerie, all in my exact size. The discovery was so creepy, so violating that I slammed the lid shut. He hadn't just collected my belongings, he'd had me profiled, measured, and curated. The kitchen was even worse. The pantry and refrigerator were a chef's dream, stocked with imported cheeses, fresh truffles, aged balsamic vinegar, and cuts of prime beef that made my mouth water. He knew I was a chef. This wasn't just provision, it was a calculated move, a taunt. He had imprisoned me, but given me the finest ingredients in the world to play with. It was the most infuriating, thoughtful act of psychological warfare I had ever encountered. The anger eventually burned itself out even behind the cold, heavy dread I'd been holding at bay. I sank onto the plush sofa, the reality of my situation crashing down on me. I was pregnant, I was alone, and I was the prisoner of a man who growled when he was angry and bought my silence with wardrobe. I wrapped my arms around my middle, my hand resting on my still flat stomach. The asset. That's what Leo had called it. A wave of fierce protective instinct so potent it made me gasp, surged through me. They could cage me, they could study me, but they would not treat my child like a line item on a balance sheet. Just then, the door clicked open. Jeffery Stormborn entered, not with guards, but alone. He had changed into a simple gray t-shirt that stretched across his broad chest, looking less like a CEO and more like the primal force of nature I'd first met. He stopped in the center of the room, his golden eyes sweeping over me, unreadable. "Enjoying the view from your new home, Miss Brook?" he asked, his voice a low, calm rumble. I stood up, my fear hardening into defiance. "It's not a home, it's a cage, and you are not my keeper." A ghost of a smile, cold and dangerous, touched his lips. "You are correct on one point. I am not your keeper. I am your alpha. And you are carrying my heir. You are not going anywhere."
Chapter 9. A bubble of incredulous laughter escaped my lips. It was a sharp, slightly hysterical sound in the opulent silence of the suite. "Alpha?" I repeated, my voice dripping with the last dregs of my defiant sarcasm. "Is that what they call the CEO in your little boys' club? Did you all watch a nature documentary and get ideas?" I folded my arms, a pathetic attempt to shield myself from the sheer, unnerving intensity of his gaze. "Let me guess, your head of marketing is the beta." He didn't react to my mockery. The cold, dangerous smile didn't even flicker. He simply watched me, his golden eyes unblinking, as if I were a fascinating, hopelessly naive creature. "It is a title," he said, his voice a low, rumbling baritone that tolerated no argument. "It means I lead, it means I protect, and it means what is mine stays mine." His gaze dropped pointedly to my stomach again, and the implication was as clear as the glass wall behind me. I felt a fresh surge of anger. "I am not a corporate asset to be acquired, Mr. Stormborn, and this baby isn't some subsidiary of your company. I have a life, a business to run, people who will wonder where I've gone." The reality of my situation hit me with a fresh wave of panic. "Give me my phone. I have a right to talk to someone." "Your phone is a liability," he stated, dismissing my demand as if it were a child's tantrum. "Your life, as you knew it, is over, at least for now. You wanted to know what I am? I am a man with enemies, vicious ones. And by carrying my heir, you have just painted a target on your back so large it can be seen from space. My rivals are not the kind of men who settle disputes in a boardroom. They are far more predatory." The way he said that last word sent a shiver of genuine fear down my spine. The growl I'd heard earlier suddenly made a terrifying kind of sense. He wasn't talking about hostile takeovers or corporate espionage. He was talking about real physical danger. He saw the flicker of understanding, the dawning horror in my eyes.
"You think this is a cage," he continued, taking a step closer, his presence consuming the air. "But for the next 7 months, this suite, this tower, is the safest place in the world for you and for my child." He stopped just before me, his shadow falling over me like a shroud. "You will be protected. You will be provided for. And you will not leave. That is not a negotiation. It is a fact. Welcome to your new reality, Miss Brook." He turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him, leaving me alone with the terrifying truth. I wasn't the prisoner of a crazy billionaire. I was a protected asset in the middle of a war I couldn't even begin to understand.
Chapter 10. For a long time after he left, I just stood there, the silence of the suite pressing in on me. The initial hot rush of defiance cooled into a grim, cold reality. He wasn't just a possessive billionaire. He was a different species of predator entirely, and I was trapped in his territory. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. I was a chef. I was a planner. And if I was in a cage, the first thing I needed to do was understand the strength of its bars. I began a systematic sweep of the suite, my new reality sharpening my senses. I checked for bugs, cameras, any sign of surveillance beyond the 2 silent guards outside my door. I found nothing, which was somehow more unnerving. His control was subtle, absolute. I tried the smart TV, searching for a browser or an email app, anything to send the message to the outside world. All non-streaming functions were locked down. The place was an elegant, high-tech dead zone. My last resort was the promise Leo had made. Any culinary request you have will be met. A slow, wicked smile spread across my face. It was my only weapon, a small, pathetic little spoon to tunnel my way out of this 5-star prison. If he wanted to treat me like a prized possession, then I would be the most demanding, outrageously expensive possession he had ever acquired. I found the small, discreet intercom panel near the kitchen. I pressed the button. A calm, professional female voice answered immediately. "Yes, Miss Brook?" I took a deep breath and unleashed my inner culinary diva. "Good afternoon," I begin, my voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. "I'm feeling a bit peckish. I'd like to request a few items for dinner. I'll need fresh, line-caught Patagonian toothfish, but only the loin, flown in this morning. Also, some white asparagus, specifically from Schwetzingen, Germany. Oh, and to finish, a single, perfect mangosteen from Southeast Asia." I paused, letting the sheer absurdity of my request hang in the air. That should do for now. The silence on the other end was brief but telling. "Of course, Miss Brook," the voice finally replied, without a single hint of surprise. "It will be delivered to you shortly." I leaned against the wall, a small triumphant laugh escaping me. Let's see his corporate empire handle that. It was a petty, childish act of rebellion, but it was mine. A few hours later, as the setting sun painted the perpetually gray Ethelgard skyline in brilliant strokes of orange and purple, a soft chime sounded at my door. A servant entered with a silver tray. On it, nestled in ice, was the pearlescent loin of a toothfish, a bundle of pristine white asparagus, and a single, perfect, deep purple mangosteen. There was no note. There was no prompt, just a silent, terrifying testament to his power. My little act of defiance had been met with effortless, absolute compliance. The message was clear. My games were nothing to him. His resources were limitless, and so was his control.
Chapter 11. I stared at the tray. The toothfish was perfect. The asparagus was flawless. The mangosteen was a tiny, fragrant jewel. My grand gesture of defiance, my attempt to be the most difficult, expensive prisoner in history, had been swatted away with the casual ease of a billionaire swatting a fly. The victory was completely, utterly hollow. He wasn't just controlling me, he was indulging me, and that was infinitely more terrifying. It meant my rebellion was a form of entertainment to him. My anger, which had been a comforting hot flame, cooled into a grim, cold resolve. My first strategy was a failure. It was time for a new one. If I couldn't break the bars of the cage, I needed to understand the man who had built it. There was one place where I still felt in control, where the world made sense. A kitchen. I took the tray of priceless ingredients into the state-of-the-art kitchenette. The knives were high-end but generic. The pans were good but not great. It was a show kitchen, designed for looks, not for a chef. Still, it was something. I began to cook. The familiar rhythmic chop of a knife on a board, the sizzle of fish hitting a hot pan, the fragrant bloom of herbs, these were my anchors. As I moved, I'd felt a piece of myself, the sharp-witted, capable chef Sonia Brook return. This was my power, my territory. An hour later, I had created a Michelin-worthy dish. I ate it slowly, staring out at the endless sprawl of Ethelgard below. The food was exquisite, but it tasted like ashes in my mouth. I was done playing games. I needed a real kitchen. I needed my tools. I walked back to the intercom, my heart steady this time. When McCall's voice answered, my tone was different. It wasn't the saccharine sweetness of a diva. It was the crisp, no-nonsense demand of a professional. This kitchen is inadequate. I require a set of Japanese steel knives, a sous vide machine, and 3 copper core saucepans. Furthermore, I need access to a larger space. A chef cannot work in a closet. I paused. Stress is not good for the asset. Using their own cold corporate language back at them felt like a small, satisfying victory. This time, the response was different. The door to my suite clicked open a few minutes later, and Jeffery Stormborn walked in. He didn't look angry. He looked intrigued. His golden eyes swept from the empty perfect plate on the counter to me. "A new strategy, Miss Brook?" he asked, his voice a low, rumbling sound that was almost amused. "A new reality," I recorded, refusing to back down. "I am a chef. I cook. I'm not just going to sit here and knit. Unless you want your heir incubated by a woman slowly going insane from boredom, I suggest you meet my terms." He stared at me for a long, silent moment, a ghost of that dangerous smile playing on his lips. "The main penthouse kitchen is on the floor below. Leo will grant you access for 3 hours a day, starting tomorrow."
Chapter 12. The next day, promptly at noon, Leo escorted me to the main penthouse kitchen on the floor below. The moment the doors slid open, my breath hitched. This wasn't a kitchen, it was a culinary temple. Gleaming stainless steel surfaces, a commercial-grade gas range that looked like the engine of a spaceship, and a walk-in refrigerator larger than my old bedroom. It was a chef's fantasy, a space of breathtaking potential. But like the rest of the penthouse, it was utterly sterile and soulless. The knives were still in their factory packaging. The copper pans hanging from the overhead rack had never seen a flame. It was a magnificent, expensive lie. I felt my 2 shadows, the silent guards, take up positions by the entrance, their presence a constant, heavy pressure. I ignored them. This was my space now. For the next 3 hours, I was not a prisoner. I was a chef in command of her domain. I tied my hair back, washed my hands, and began to work. The sterile silence was soon replaced by the comforting, rhythmic sounds of my craft, the sharp, percussive chop of onions, the sizzle of garlic hitting hot oil, the gentle bubble of a simmering pot. I wasn't making him a gourmet meal, I was making a statement. I was making a rich, slow-braised beef and barley stew. The hearty, fragrant aroma of herbs, root vegetables, and savory beef began to permeate the air, a warm, vibrant scent of life and comfort that was a declaration of war against the cold, minimalist silence of his tower. It was the smell of home, of everything his cold, controlled world was not. I was lost in the process, seasoning and tasting, when a low, rumbling voice cut through my concentration. "What is that smell?" I turned to find Jeffery Stormborn standing in the doorway, his golden eyes narrowed. He looked completely out of place, a predator in a bespoke suit drawn in by a strange and unfamiliar scent. He wasn't looking at me with amusement now. He was looking with a raw, unguarded confusion, as if the aroma was a foreign language his senses were struggling to translate. "It's called food, Mr. Stormborn," I said, my voice steady and confident. I was on my turf now. "A concept your kitchen seems unfamiliar with." I held up a tasting spoon, the rich dart stew a stark splash of color and the monochrome world. "You should try it sometime. It might put some warmth in you." He stared at the spoon, then at me, and for the first time since I'd met him, the vicious alpha looked completely and utterly thrown off his game.
Chapter 13. The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to taste. Jeffrey stared at the spoon I held out, the steam from the rich, dark stew rising in a fragrant, defiant cloud between us. I expected him to sneer, to dismiss it, to make some cutting remark about my unsophisticated culinary choices. A man who lived in a glass tower and subsisted on what I could only assume was protein shakes and the souls of his competitors wouldn't possibly deign to eat something so vibrant, so full of life. It was a standoff, a battle of wills waged over a spoonful of stew. His reputation, his entire aura of cold, untouchable power was on the line. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned forward. He didn't take the spoon from me. Instead, he closed the distance. His golden eyes locked on mine, and ate the stew directly from the spoon I was holding. The simple, shockingly intimate act sent a jolt of electricity straight through my hand and up my arm. My breath hitched for a dizzying second. Our faces were just inches apart, and I could feel the heat radiating from him. He straightened up, his expression unreadable as he tasted the food. I watched, holding my breath. I'm a chef. I can read a person's entire life story in the way they react to a flavor. I saw it then. A flicker. A ghost of an expression in those predatory golden eyes. It wasn't just approval. It was a profound visceral shock, as if he had tasted sunshine for the very first time. The rich, complex flavors, the deep, comforting warmth, it was a burst of pure, chaotic, joyful life that had no place in his sterile, controlled world. It was a taste of home, even if it wasn't a home he had ever known. He swallowed, and the mask of the cold, vicious alpha slammed back into place, but I had seen the chink in his armor. I had seen the man behind the monster. "It is adequate," he said, his voice a low, rough rumble. But the word was a lie. His eyes told a different story. Just then, Leo appeared at the doorway, a tablet in his hand, his expression as placid as ever. "Sir," he said, his tone a gentle but firm reminder of the world outside this kitchen, "the board members from the consortium are waiting on the conference line." Jeffrey's focus snapped away from me and back to his empire. The brief, fragile connection was severed. He gave me one last, long, unreadable look before turning and sweeping out of the kitchen, all business and brutal efficiency once more. I was left there standing, my heart hammering against my ribs, surrounded by the warm, fragrant aroma of my stew. He had tasted my food. He had tasted a piece of my world. And for the first time since I'd been brought to this tower, I felt like I had a weapon that could actually reach him.
Chapter 14. My daily 3 hours in the kitchen became my sanctuary and my battlefield. Every day at noon, Leo would escort me down, and every day, I would fill the sterile, silent air of the penthouse with the warm, vibrant sense of life. I cooked my way through my memories, the smoky, spice-rubbed lamb skewers that tasted of street fairs, the rich, earthy wild mushroom broth that was my go-to comfort food, the sweet fried dough that tasted of lazy Sunday mornings.
Each dish was a small, defiant act of bringing my world into his cold glass tower. A strange, unspoken routine began to form. Around 1 o'clock each day, Jeffery Stormborn would just happen to appear. He'd stride into the open-plan living area adjacent to the kitchen, pretending to be on an important business call, his voice a low, commanding rumble as he paced. But his golden eyes would betray him, constantly flicking towards the kitchen, towards me. He was drawn by the scents, a powerful, predatory animal lured in by a strange and unfamiliar comfort. He never spoke to me, never acknowledged the food, but he was always there, a silent, brooding observer orbiting my culinary world. One afternoon, I was making a simple chicken and herb broth, the sharp, clean aroma of thyme and rosemary filling the air. It was a quiet, contemplative dish for a quiet, gray, Ethelgard day. I was lost in the familiar process when I realized the pacing had stopped. I looked up to see him standing just outside the kitchen threshold, his suit jacket off and his tie loosened. He wasn't pretending to be on the phone anymore. He was just watching me, a look of raw, unguarded longing on his face. It was the look of a starving man staring through a restaurant window. "My mother used to make something that smelled like that," he said, his voice quiet, stripped of its usual authority. The admission was so unexpected, so vulnerable, it felt like a crack in the foundation of the world. My own carefully constructed walls wavered. I saw him then, not as the vicious alpha or the corporate titan, but as a man who was just as lonely as I was, trapped in a different kind of cage. Without thinking, I ladled a small amount of the fragrant broth into a bowl. I didn't hold it out to him this time. I simply placed it on the cool marble countertop that separated our two worlds. "It's good for the soul," I said softly. He didn't move for a long moment. Then slowly he walked over, picked up the bowl, and tasted it. He closed his eyes, and for a single, breathtaking second, he wasn't a king in his tower. He was just a man remembering his home.
Chapter 15. He finished the entire bowl of broth in a few, slow, deliberate spoonfuls, the silence in the kitchen stretching into a taut, humming wire. He didn't say thank you, not with words. Instead, he placed the empty bowl carefully on the counter and gave me a single, profound nod before turning and leaving without a backward glance. The gesture was louder than any compliment. The vicious alpha had been fed, and for a moment the man had emerged. The next day, the routine changed. My 3 hours of culinary freedom began, but Jeffrey didn't pace in the adjoining living area. Instead, he walked directly to the massive marble island that served as a border between the kitchen and the rest of the penthouse, and sat down on one of the steel bar stools. He opened a sleek and possibly thin laptop and began to work, his fingers flying across the keyboard with silent efficiency. He said nothing, didn't even look at me, but his presence was a tangible thing, a silent, brooding mountain in my kitchen. Great, I thought, my sarcasm a welcome and turn a shield. My prison now comes with a golden-eyed billionaire roommate who thinks a quarterly report is appropriate kitchen conversation. Refusing to be intimidated, I started my prep. The rhythmic chop of my knife a defiant beat against his silent typing. I was making a rich potato and leek soup, another classic comfort dish. I was stirring the pot, lost in the familiar process, when I felt it, a tiny distinct flutter deep in my belly. It wasn't a cake, more like the gentle brush of a butterfly's wing. It was the first time. My breath caught in my throat, my hand instinctively flying to my stomach. The spoon clattered against the side of the pot. Jeffy's head snapped up, his predator's focus zeroing in on me instantly. The CEO vanished, replaced by something far more primal. "What is it?" he demanded with his voice sharp with alarm. "Are you in pain?" I stared at him, my heart doing a nervous flip-flop. This moment, this tiny, secret miracle, wasn't just mine. He was a captor, an infuriating, possessive father. He had a right to know. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. "I'm not in pain. I think the baby just moved." His entire world seemed to stop. The ruthless alpha, the vicious corporate titan, went completely still. His golden eyes, usually so sharp and calculating, softened, widening with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. He wasn't looking at me anymore. He was staring at my stomach as if he could see the miracle happening inside. The fragile, sacred moment was shattered as Leo answered, his face a mask of grim urgency. "Sir, we have a problem. Silas Kane just made a hostile bid for the Port Authority contract. It's an aggressive, direct challenge." The awe in Jeffrey's face vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, hard mask of the king. The battle outside the tower had just come calling. He gave me one last, lingering look, a silent promise, before sweeping out of the room with Leo, leaving me with my hand on my belly, a silent witness to the war he was fighting to keep our fragile world safe.
Chapter 16. The kitchen, which had felt like a sanctuary moments before, was suddenly cold and empty again. The rich, comforting aroma of the soup seemed to mock the sterile silence Jeffrey left in his wake. I stood there for a long time, one hand on my belly, the other gripping the cool marble countertop. I had just shared the most profound, intimate moment of my life with my captor, only to have it ripped away by the harsh reality of his world. Silas Kane. Hostile bid. It sounded like corporate jargon, but the look on Jeffrey's face had been one of a king facing an invading army. Later that afternoon, I saw what that war looked like. From the living area of my suite, I could see down into the main penthouse floor through a clever architectural cutout. Jeffrey was in his office space, not shouting, but his quiet intensity was far more terrifying. He was on a conference call, his voice a low, lethal hum that carried through the silent tower. "Liquidate their holdings in the energy sector," he commanded, his tone as sharp and cold as a surgeon's scalpel. "Every last share. I want them bleeding before the market opens in Tokyo." He paused, listening to a response I couldn't hear. "I don't care what it takes. Silas Kane challenged my family. This is not a negotiation. It is an extermination." Family. The word struck me with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't talking about business rivals. He was talking about enemies, and he was fighting a war on a scale I couldn't comprehend. I finally understood. His vicious reputation wasn't a personality flaw. It was a weapon. It was the high, electrified fence that kept the wolves of his world at bay. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was inside that fence with him. The man who had imprisoned me was also my fiercest, most terrifying protector. The thought was deeply, profoundly unsettling. That evening, there was a soft chime at my door. It was Leo. He held a sleek, brand new tablet in his hands. "The Alpha thought you might appreciate access to something other than streaming services," he said, his expression as placid as ever. I took it from him hesitantly. "Does it have internet?" I asked, my heart giving a hopeful leap. "A heavily secured, firewalled version. There is no access to email or social media, but you can read the news, access culinary journals, academic archives, reconnect with the world in a controlled manner." He left me with the device. It was another bar in my gilded cage, a leash with a little more slack. But it was also a window, a concession. It was a sign that the man who had tasted my soup, the man whose face had transformed with awe when he learned his child had moved, was beginning to see me as more than just an asset. He was seeing a person. And I felt a flicker of something that felt dangerously, terrifyingly like gratitude.
Chapter 17. The next few weeks settled into a strange domestic rhythm that felt both deeply unsettling and dangerously comfortable. My pregnancy was no longer a secret. my belly a gentle swelling curve that had forced me to abandon my pre-tower wardrobe in favor of the comfortable, expensive clothes Jeffrey had provided. My days revolved around the tablet and the kitchen. I devoured culinary journals, critiqued Athelgard's restaurant scene from my glass prison, and planned menus for a restaurant that existed only in my head. The raw terror of my first few days had been replaced by a quiet, simmering tension, a constant awareness of the man who now orbited my life. Our kitchen encounters were the heart of this strange new reality. He would sit at the marble island with his laptop, a silent, brooding mountain of bespoke tailoring, while I cooked. The air between us was thick with unspoken things, a slow-burning fuse leading to an unknown destination. One afternoon, I decided to push the boundaries. I wasn't making elegant, refined cuisine. I was making the glorious, messy, unapologetically delicious street food of my city. I was making spice-rubbed lamb skewers with a fiery garlic sauce. The smoky, spicy aroma filled the pet house, a fragrant rebellion against its minimalist aesthetic. "I hope you're not afraid to get your hands dirty, Mr. Stormborn," I teased as I glanced over at him as I artfully assembled a skewer. "This doesn't exactly come with a knife and fork." He didn't look up from his screen, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch. "I am capable of adapting, Miss Brook." My playful mood evaporated a short while later. While scrolling through a local news site on the tablet, an article caught my eye. A new, trendy restaurant was opening on the very street, in the very building where I had planned to launch my own. My 10-year plan. It felt like reading an obituary for a life I would never get to live. A wave of profound, suffocating grief washed over me. I tried to push it down, to focus on the rhythmic task of turning the skewers, but the joy was gone. The kitchen, my sanctuary, suddenly felt like the most beautiful cage of all. The silence from the marble island became heavy. I felt his golden eyes on me, not just watching, but seeing. He had been so attuned to the energy of my cooking that he noticed its absence immediately. He closed his laptop with a soft final click. "The food is quiet today," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't an observation. It was a question. I didn't answer, just kept my back to him, focusing on the grill. "You miss your city," he stated, not with pity, but with a simple, profound understanding. I felt him move, his powerful presence coming to a stop directly behind me. "When this is over," he said, his voice a low, intense promise, right beside my ear, "I will build you a restaurant that will make every other establishment in this city look like a roadside food stall. I will give you an empire." I finally turned, my eyes blurring with tears I hadn't realized were falling. His hand came up, his thumb gently, almost hesitantly, wiping a tear from my cheek. The touch was electric, a jolt of warmth that shattered my defenses. His gaze was no longer that of a king or a captor, but of a man, fierce and protective, looking at the one thing in the world he couldn't bear to see broken.
Chapter 18. His touch lingered on my skin long after he retreated, a phantom warmth that both soothed and terrified me. That single, gentle gesture had shattered the fragile barrier I had built between us. He was no longer just a captor, and I was no longer just his prisoner. We were two lonely people in a glass tower, bound together by an impossible secret and the steady, growing life inside me. The change was palpable. The next day, the air in the kitchen wasn't thick with tension, but with a quiet, humming awareness. He worked silently at the island, but I could feel his gaze on me, no longer just watchful, but possessive and profoundly gentle. Later that afternoon, he closed his laptop and looked at me, his expression serious. "You have an appointment," he stated, not as a command, but as a fact. I bristled slightly, my independence flaring up. An appointment for what and with whom? I'd like to see my own doctor. "Your human doctors would not know what to look for," he he said, his voice calm and absolute, leaving no room for argument. Dr. Anya is the best. She will be here in an hour. I expected a stern clinical woman in a white coat with a portable ultrasound machine. I spent the hour steeling myself for the cold, impersonal prodding of a medical exam. Instead, the woman who arrived was something else entirely. She was an elder, her face a beautiful roadmap of deep, kind lines, her hair a cascade of silver braids woven with small, polished stones. She wore simple, elegant fabrics and smelled of dried herbs and ancient wisdom. She was introduced as Mama Anya. Her eyes, a warm, knowing brown, held no judgment, only a deep, profound empathy as she looked at me. She didn't lead me to a sterile room. Instead, she gestured to the comfortable sofa in my suite. "Lie down, my child," she said, her voice a soft, melodic alto that instantly calmed my frayed nerves. I glanced nervously at Jeffrey, who stood by the window, a silent, formidable guardian. He gave me a single reassuring nod. Hesitantly, I lay back on the sofa. Mama Anya didn't use a stethoscope or a blood pressure cuff. She simply knelt beside me and placed her warm, dry hands on my belly. I flinched, for Jeffrey was at my side in an instant, his large, warm hand enveloping my own, his strength a steady, silent anchor. Anya closed her eyes, her brow furrowed in concentration. A soft, warm energy seemed to flow from her hands, a gentle heat that sunk deep into my skin. It wasn't intrusive, it felt like a greeting. After a long, silent moment, a slow, wondrous smile spread across her face. "Ah," she breathed, "he's strong, a true Alpha's heir. His wolf spirit is bright and fierce like a young lion." She opened her eyes, her warm gaze meeting mine. "But the mother, your spirit sings a song I have not heard in a long time. It is quiet, but it is ancient, a song of the earth itself." She looked from me to Jeffrey, her smile knowing. "You have chosen well, Alpha. She is more than she seems."
Chapter 19. After Mama Anya left, a profound and unsettling silence filled the suite. Her cryptic words echoed in my mind, replaying on a loop. "Your spirit sings a song I have not heard in a very long time, a song of the earth itself." It wasn't a medical diagnosis, it was a prophecy, and it made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. I looked at Jeffrey, who'd retreated to his position by the window, a formidable silhouette against the perpetually gray sky. The brief, fragile connection we'd shared while he held my hand was gone, replaced by a wall of secrets. I couldn't take it anymore. The half-truths, the intense stares, the growling, it was all a puzzle, and I finally had a piece that felt real. "What did she mean?" I demanded, my voice sharp, cutting through the silence. He turned slowly, his golden eyes unreadable. "A song of the earth? What kind of doctor was that? Is this some kind of weird billionaire cult I've stumbled into?" My rational mind was scrambling for a logical explanation, however bizarre. He didn't answer immediately. He just watched me, a long, calculating look on his face, as if weighing the consequences of his next words. Finally, he gestured for me to join him at the window. Hesitantly, I did. Below us, the city of Edelgard hummed with its usual chaotic energy, the endless river of traffic, the distant spires disappearing into the mist. It was the real world, solid, normal. "You see the city, Sonia," he began, his voice a low, quiet rumble. "You see it as a world of humans, of concrete, business, and ambition. But beneath that, there's another world, an older one, a world of instinct, of power, of bloodlines that have existed since before the city was even a thought." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "What are you talking about?" He finally turned his full, intense gaze on me. "You call me an alpha." he said, his voice dropping even lower, each word landing with the weight of absolute truth. I stared at him, a bubble of hysterical laughter rising in my throat. A species? What are you trying to say? That you're not human? He didn't flinch. He simply held my gaze, and for a split second, something in his eyes shifted. The pupils elongated, the molten gold flaring with an inner predatory light. It was a change so subtle and so impossible that my brain struggled to process it. My laughter died in my throat. "You're serious," I whispered, the words catching on a wave of pure, cold shock. "My world is not the one you read about in your books, Sonia," he continued, his voice calm and deadly serious. "Mama Anya is an elder of my pack, and what she saw in you, it confirms a truth I have suspected since the day you walked into this tower. The question is not just what I am, the question is what are you?"
Chapter 20. A cold, sharp laugh escaped my lips. It was a brittle, terrified sound. "Right. A species," I repeated, taking a stumbling step back, away from him. "Of course. And I suppose all those men in black suits are your pack?" My mind, a fortress of logic and reason, was desperately trying to build walls against the impossible truth he was presenting. I gestured wildly around the opulent penthouse. "Is this all some elaborate prank? A psychological experiment to see if you can drive your pregnant one-night stand insane? Because congratulations, Mr. Stormborn, it's working." He watched my frantic denial with a look of profound, weary patience. "This is not a game, Sonia." "Then you're crazy!" I shouted, my voice cracking. "You're a delusional, egomaniacal billionaire who has surrounded himself with people who feed his god complex. You're not a wolf, you're just—" He cut me off, not with words, but with a simple, terrifying action. He held up his hand, palm facing me. "Watch," he commanded, his voice a low, rumbling growl. I stared, mesmerized against my will, as something impossible happened. The lines on his skin seemed to shift, his fingernails thickening, darkening, and elongating into sharp, black claws. It was a subtle, silent transformation, but it was undeniable, a flagrant violation of every law of nature I had ever known. I couldn't breathe. The air in my lungs turned to ice. My carefully constructed reality, my entire understanding of the world shattered into a million pieces. The growl, the golden eyes, the impossible speed, the way he knew everything. It was real. He was not human, and by extension, the child growing inside me, our child, was not entirely human either. A wave of vertigo washed over me, and my knees buckled. Before I could fall, he was there, moving faster than my eyes could track, his arms wrapping around me, holding me steady. His touch was warm and solid, an anchor in the dizzying sea of my shattered world. I looked up at him, my eyes wide with terror so profound it had burned past screaming. "What does this have to do with me?" "Mama Anya said, she said something about my spirit." His golden eyes, now returned to normal, held mine. They were filled with a certainty that left no room for doubt. "You are not human, Sonia," he said, the words landing with the final devastating force of a prophecy. "You could not have conceived my child if you were. Whatever you are, whatever that ancient song is that sleeps in your blood, it is a part of my world. You belong here, with me."
Chapter 21. I recoiled from his touch, scrambling backwards until my back hit the cool, unyielding glass of the window. The city lights of Ethelgard, once a symbol of my ambition and independence, now felt like a taunting reminder of a world I no longer belonged to. My mind was a maelstrom of denial and terror. Wolves, packs, alphas. It was the stuff of fantasy novels, not the reality of a chef from the artisan quarter. "No," I whispered, shaking my head, my hands pressed against the glass as if I could phase through it and back to my old life. "No, that's not possible. I'm just me. I get flustered in traffic. I burn toast sometimes. I am painfully, boringly human. Jeffrey didn't press me. He didn't use that terrifying alpha voice or show me his claws again. Instead, he did something far more disarming. He showed me the man. He walked over to the bar and poured 2 glasses of water, his movement slow and deliberate. He placed one on a table near me. "For my entire life, Sonia," he began, his voice quiet, stripped of all its authority, "this power has been a tool and a burden. It helped me build this empire, but it isolated me from everyone in it. It made me a king in a world of one." He stared out at the city, his golden eyes filled with a profound, ancient loneliness that resonated with a hidden part of my own orphan soul. I rule a pack, but I have never had a family, not a real one. He finally turned to look at me, and his gaze was raw, vulnerable. Then you walked in, a human, a complication I couldn't control, and you brought with you life. You filled this empty place with the smell of home, and you carry the one thing I never thought I would have. He took a step closer, his hands open at his sides in a gesture of peace. "I don't know what you are. I don't know what song your spirit sings, but I know that for the first time in a century, my wolf is not just a predator. It's at peace because it knows its mate is finally here." Mate. The words settled in the air between us, not as a threat, but as a truth. The terror that had been choking me began to recede, replaced by a strange, breathtaking clarity. I wasn't afraid of the monster. I was falling in love with the man. My 10-year plan was a relic of a life that no longer existed. My future wasn't in a restaurant I owned. It was here, at the top of the world, with a man who was more than human and a child who was a miracle. I looked at him, at this vicious, lonely king who had just laid his entire vulnerable soul at my feet. Slowly, hesitantly, I pushed myself off the window and took a step towards him, towards my new reality, towards my home.